So we started working on what we are referring to as the history walking tour, and we have completed phase 1.
We were lucky enough to be able to interview several people who have since passed away. It's difficult to get that information down unless you can talk to people and ask them questions firsthand and then listen to what they remember. And what they remember sometimes is amazing. One of the people that we interviewed, we went to Beatrice to speak to. Some of you would know her, Lorna Waldmeyer. And we got a lot of information about Willard Park. But I think what's more important is the information what we got about life in Hebron 80 years ago, 90 years ago. It's a different story. There's an Australian writer who wrote, "The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there." Well, boy, did we find that out. We've been working on this project for 5 years.
Yeah, going on 5.
In one sense, it started when the Hebron 150th anniversary asked for a history tour of town. And I was lucky enough to be able to conduct that on a trolley where we went around town and looked at sites. And then from there, we started talking about sites that we wanted to put signs up for or remember in some way. And so we have sites marked, in some cases with signs on the buildings, in some cases with signs that are outside the buildings. And we're planning on a second phase of this tour that will talk about the CC camp that became the POW camp here in Hebron, the college that many people don't even realize was here at one time, things of that nature. We're going to go back even a little deeper and talk about Fort Butler and the Oregon Trail. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Linda and let her talk a little bit about that part of it.
Well, history has kind of been my thing, even though I grew up going to Hebron High School and having Mr. Kolba and Mrs. Hughes as my music instructors. And just as our speaker mentioned this morning, what a great background we all had in these small communities. And I'm so grateful. I took the 60-year class through the high school the other day, and believe it or not, it took 2 hours. And it wasn't because we walked slow. They looked at everything, all the new additions, and it was a wonderful experience of sharing our common memories of different teachers and different experiences. I did relate one experience that was pretty traumatic to Roger Pumphrey. His brother Hal was in my class, and Hal, we didn't know in high school, became a doctor. And one of his experiments in high school, in one of our rooms, must have been a little bit bored, he picked up a paper punch and punched his ear. And it bled like you would not believe. And of course, his brother enjoyed that story immensely. And it was a traumatic thing that my classmates have never forgotten. So that's pretty typical of growing up in the small community and sharing those interesting experiences in your life. My experience here, I actually taught history for over 30 years at Superior, and so I was asked to help with the Cattlemen's Ball a few years ago here in the local community, and my experience then with local history kind of started at that time. We had a 60 by 90 history tent that traced fighting cancer on the Oregon Trail. So I started to do a lot more local research, and I worked also as a docent at the History Museum in Lincoln, and so I got a lot of training for a year on Nebraska history, which in AP American history, and I taught world history, you don't have that experience so much when you're teaching your classes in high school. So I really started focusing more on state and local history. I want to mention right now, too, as I see her sitting out here, one resource in Thayer County we're so lucky to have is Jackie Williamson in Belvedere at the museum. And I did a lot of research. And I'm so appreciative that she's joined us today, because it was a tremendous resource for me as I've done local history for all of us, basically. And so we're glad she's here to share this experience with us. We started our committee a few years ago, did many interviews. Johnny and Idana are here in the second row. We went to their house, and 3 hours later,
3, I think it was closer to 4.
it was so enjoyable.
After coffee and donuts.
Yeah, and then she shared rolls and coffee. So she figured we were getting hungry after 3 hours of interview. But it was so interesting to hear all of the local stories of businesses and people who lived here and worked here in the community. And we all enjoyed that immensely and gained a lot of very special stories from Johnny and Idana. So that was kind of how we all got involved and got started. We do have that all recorded history, and we're working on trying to get that edited a little bit. So for 4 years now, we've had regular meetings, and each of us has researched in depth. And on the signs, by the way, what we've done, and it's new technology, is we've put QR codes on the signs. So when you get your phone, most of you, if you eat in restaurants, you have to QR code. You put your phone on the QR code and open it up, and you get a little more in-depth history of this site. And we had mostly high school students record those for us to kind of have them involved also in this process. So I had to show one of the gentlemen downtown, Mr. Labor, how to QR code, because he wasn't familiar with it. He knew what it was, but he had never used it on his phone. So I went over there one day, and he was nice enough then. He has a beautiful home to show me the inside of his home, and I truly enjoyed that. But the recordings give you more in-depth information. So what's taken so long is doing the research to try to make sure that we were doing appropriate information and accurate information as much as we could. You don't always have primary source information, but that's why our interviews were important to us, was to get some primary source, people that were there at the event, so then you trust the information a little bit more. So anyway, we have picked, 15 sites now?
I think there's actually 17 or 18.
18. There's 3 in the city park downtown in Roosevelt Park. We start there with Fort Butler and some of the early history. This community actually started with a group of Christians who moved here after the Homestead Act, of course, and tried to set up homesteads, and they were called Union Colony, and that basically is the background of the Christian church. And so that is the beginning of this community. But Fort Butler provided them some protection from the Native American rebellions in that mid-1860s revolt, and so that's basically why Fort Butler was important. It was more of a National Guard, local militia group that protected the Union Colony, the 18 people who came here as our founding fathers for this community. So that's basically how we started, and then we've done some of the houses, like Joseph Prentice, the only Nebraskan to win the Medal of Honor in the Civil War. His home is on the site, and he's one of the early settlers here locally. And then we've added other things, some of the early church history, the Christian church, the Presbyterian church, all have signs about the history of those. And then, of course, Mary Green's house and her daughter, Ivy, that house, those are also on there because of their linkage to the suffrage developments in our local community here. Thayer County is very important because that's where the suffrage movement in Nebraska actually started to be organized by a local group of women, approximately 35 women, under the leadership of Lucy Correll. So that's basically why Thayer County is so important in the suffrage movement in Nebraska and in the western regions. And the Corrells, of course, published what was called the Western Journal, and the Western Journal spread the suffrage ideas into the western regions. So those things are all really important in the early history, and we are going to talk about that a little bit more in our program. Anybody else have something you want to?
I want to make one more comment that backs up something that General Kunkel said this morning. He asked about the 4th of July program. Over the last couple of years, we've had a youth group called YAC, Youth Achievement Committee, that has done a wonderful job with Willard Park, rejuvenating it, And this summer, they are taking over the operation of the 4th of July program. These are high school kids. We're starting them early on some of these projects because some of us are getting to be old duffers and we're not going to be around to do some of this. Your turn.
Do you want me to go ahead and just finish the thank yous for this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today, in addition to doing a dedication for the Hebron Suffrage Legacy of Courage Park, we are also doing an opening of our history walking tour. On this tour, as Linda said, you're going to learn about Hebron's history. You're going to learn about adventure, heroism, patriotism, activism, generosity, and leadership. The tour is going to start at Roosevelt Park, and then, like she said, it will stop at several historic buildings and the homes of suffragists and, of course, our Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. So on that project, we want to thank people who have been involved in helping this come to happen. Jackie Williamson, Director, Thayer County Museum, the City of Hebron, all of the people that we interviewed, the students and patrons who did the audio stories. A special thank you to Jeff McLaughlin. He helped us with the placing of the signs, both the posts and on the buildings. Lee Courting, we called on her teacher skills to do the proofing of all of our copy before it was put out there. And lastly, our walking tour sponsors. The funds were received from the Thayer County Visitors Committee, the City of Hebron, the Nebraska Historical Society Foundation, and the Art Council of Thayer County.